Good morning, everybody. And so we continue our exploration of the Rig Veda. And maybe not only the Rig Veda, but the whole body of knowledge which starts with the Rig Veda. Yesterday there was a wonderful presentation by Matthias on consciousness again. And it was very tangible to see the shift of paradigms, which I was telling you theoretically, but it wasn't making much sense, that the faculties of consciousness are free from the mental construct. But if you could see it, that it is really tangibly there, the presence of consciousness through all the faculties, and the world is seen very different from that perspective than you mentalize it and you channelize it through the mind alone, through the sense mind, as we usually do. We are used to this paradigm of thinking about the world, thinking about what is happening. We are always thinking. But we do not see and do not perceive the world directly and ourselves. So because we do not have that secret knowledge. And that was given in a very simple, very short text, which is known as Kena Upanishad, for example. Yad vachana bhyuditam yena vaga bhyudiyate tadeva brahmatvam vidhi nedam yedidam upasate. That which is not spoken by the speech, but by which the speech is being spoken, that you know as Brahman, and not that what people worship here. So there was already an issue. People were worshipping some kind of form of spirit, or having some approach to it in the, maybe even in the religious way, not in the psychological way, as an object of adoration or something. But Kena is very clear about it. It is not that, because it is not spoken by the speech. It is that by which the speech is speaking or spoken. Yan manasana manute yenahur manomatam tadeva brahmatvam vidhi nedam yedidam upasate. That which is not thought by the mind, but by which the mind is being thought. That is Brahman. Yat chakshushana pashyati yena chakshunshi pashyati tadeva brahmatvam vidhi nedam yedidam upasate. That which is not seen by the eye, but by which the eye is seeing or being seen. That is Brahman. Yat shrotrena nashranuti yena shrotramidam shrutam tadeva. Which is not heard by hearing, but by which the hearing is heard. That is Brahman. And even coming to prana level, it is not led by prana, but by which the prana is being led into life. That is Brahman. Even life itself. So Sri Aurobindo speaks about the sight of our sight, the hearing of our hearing. And that is Brahman, the prana, the life of our life. It is Brahman. So consciousness is a very concrete phenomenon. It's not even phenomenon, it's some kind of phenomenon. It's the word which is coming from the mental construct, again, from the mental structure of consciousness. When we use the thought process, we have to say phenomenon. It is not phenomenon, it is reality. Concrete reality without which nothing is known or is possible to be known. So this is the shift from the mental towards some kind of Vedic paradigm. But there was even one more step, deeper step, away from even this construct of the faculties of consciousness, and that was the Vedic vision, where these were presumed, understood as functional, but not addressed directly or dealt with in the system of Vedic knowledge. Some other forces were invited and dealt with. which utilize these faculties of consciousness. In that sense, Veda is more, as Shubhinu says, experiential and even utilitarian, because it is using the forces which are higher than universal forces of consciousness to participate within our individual framework. I'm only promising you to show the scheme, and I never did it up to now, but I will do it. I'm saying many times this shift I make from Sankhyayic to Vedantic, and then I say there is something else waiting there. I want your curiosity to be on the highest level, where you will be already seeing something, and then I will confirm that seeing with the scheme which is there. But what is interesting about the Veda, then even this vision, which is very practical and psychological, is given to you by the word. If Matthias would not speak yesterday, there would be no tangible perception of that consciousness. It's not possible to get it without really making it clear to our outer consciousness that there is an inner being. So that is done by the word. That's why all this literature is there. And the whole Indian tradition is word-oriented tradition. It is not much about the outer sacrifice, about the bodily movement, rituals. It's more about the mantra, about the word. And here I would like maybe to come to this major concept of the Veda, how the word was used, how the hymns are used, and what do they really mean, what is their functionality. So, to give you kind of an entry, it would be interesting to mention here the myth of which is taken from Mahabhashya of Patanjali, where he gives this beautiful myth about creation in linguistic terms, where grammar is coming from, where the word is coming from, what does it really mean. So, Brihaspati, who is the Lord of the Divine Word, Brihaspati, who is located in the heart, who brings the intention of the divine into the manifestation and creates the worlds, the Lord of the Word, was the teacher, and Indra, the Lord of the Divine Mind, was his student. So Indra was sitting at his feet and learning from him Sanskrit language, of that first original Sanskrit word. But since the word, the meaning and the sound, so to say, the vak and artha, were one and the same, whatever Brihaspati spoke was actual to that moment of time, true. In that eternal time, it was always actual, true. It was not misplaced to explain something. When it was sounding, it was that. It was the meaning. So Indra understood that he cannot learn from him Sanskrit because there is no end to that word, to that speech. It is infinite, endless. He understood he has to spend all his life sitting there learning it, and he will never finish learning it. So what he did was interesting. He stopped that flow of Brihaspati's speech, stopped it, and cut it into pieces, into grams, and created grammar. It will give you a deep insight into what grammar is and what language is. How did he cut it into pieces? By what means? By grammatical categories, mental categories of grammar. Subject, object, predicate, relations, time, space, manner, causality. All these are the means of the mind by which that one reality was refashioned. And then that is considered to be the myth of creation. The word could be applied now not in its own true context, but it can be misplaced. The word is always truthful to itself, but the context may differ. And it's a very interesting insight. That's why in Sanskrit there is no word for lie. There is no lying. There is only asatyam or anritam. Mithya is not lie. Mithya is vain, which is later can be translated in English as lie. But asatyam is, anritam is exactly that. That means that satyam, the truth, is not actual now. It is true, but it is not in this context. Because the context is misplaced. And this misplacement of context is due to the creation of grammar, due to the creation of language, which now can be exercised in any context. You can see the vision, how creation comes into being in this way. I will read few quotations to you from Sri Aurobindo, where he explains what Sanskrit represents, just as an entry to this presentation. He says in the Synthesis of Yoga that we have to deal with yoga, we have to deal with a class of supreme experiences, class of unusual conceptions, which it is difficult to represent accurately in any other language than the ancient Sanskrit tongue, in which alone they have been to some extent systematized. The only approximate terms in the English language have other associations, and their use may lead to many and even serious inaccuracies. Because every word has a particular context. So if you translate these words into English, you have words, terms which are loaded with contextual meanings. And that's how they make this term inaccurate. The Sanskrit language, the Deva Bhasha, or the original language spoken by men in Uttarameru at the beginning of Manvantara, but in its purity it is not the Sanskrit of Dvapara or Kali Yuga. It is the language of Satya Yuga, based on the true and perfect relation of Vak and Artha. So that relation of Brihaspati's word, where the meaning is carried by the sound, this knowledge is still present. The Brihaspati's speech is still present while Indra is acting with the word. And that is because of that speech or that word, which is always vibrating there somewhere, that the words are becoming true or untrue here. When they match with their actual meaning, then we feel the presence of the truth. When they mismatch, we feel that it is not in this context. It doesn't have the power. It is an interesting thought that, by the way, poets feel this very deeply. That's why they are so particular about words in the poem. This word would not fit here, though it means the same thing, but even, the position of the word, or Synonymia, for example, as I was already mentioning, huge ocean and big ocean, mean different things because the Brihaspati speech is still there. It is still sounding there, vibrating somewhere at the highest heaven. Sri Aurobindo was very much into this science of new science of language. And he wrote, the true method of science is to go back to the origins, the embryology, the elements and more obscure processes of things. From the obvious, only the obvious and superficial results. The profundities of things, their real truth, can best be discovered by penetration into the hidden things that the surface of phenomena conceals, into that past development of which the finished forms present only secret and dispersed indications, or into the possibility from which the actualities we see are only a narrow selection. A similar method applied to the earlier forms of human speech can alone give us a real science of language. We have to see where it started from, how it started. And that would lead us to the real science of language. Law and process must have governed the origins and developments of language. Given the necessary clue, the sufficient data, they must be discoverable. It seems to me that in the Sanskrit language the clue can be found, the data lie ready for investigation. We can find an equal regularity, an equal reign of fixed process on the psychological side in the determining of the relation of particular sense to particular sound. You had an introduction to it by Sampath. I'm sure it was very useful. You could see the thinking of Sri Aurobindo. And what is interesting here, that these sounds like A, I, U, Ri, basic sounds, they are not in themselves carriers of the meaning, but in the process of articulation there is a certain psychological state which they represent. And that psychological state is regular. When we articulate A or I or U, something is happening to us. And that thing is the meaning. That tension in the articulation of particular sound creates a particular psychological state in us.
But the sound in itself also has its power.
How?
That's why you can say that corresponds to absolute existence. Because you can get 5 people to
This is Sampath's view. I understand this, but I don't subscribe for this, that sounds by themselves. If we would have different apparatus of some kind of dolphin, for example, such different vocal cords, you think we would not have access to Brihaspati's speech? Brihaspati's speech is not the sound, Vaikhari sound which you see here. It is the attempt to articulate a particular meaning. I understand. You just think about it. And it corresponds to the system of sounds. We know them as these sounds, these particular attempts, because we have this apparatus, this particular formation made by nature. You don't agree that we have this apparatus?
have the apparatus, but the apparatus only helps to formulate that a sound which is there in the cosmos, irrespective of how we are giving form to it. They are there, and it's only when the human apparatus is able to reformulate that sound that we get the whole power, the depth of it.
Do you understand the argument? No, by articulation of this particular meaning, we have A and U and Ri. And that is the meaning, not A in itself. A in itself has no meaning and cannot have.
So the meaning is related
To the articulation of A. It is very, very logical. I don't think it is something illogical. It's very normal to understand this way.
The sound arm must already be present for us to make it. We do assign meaning to the sound, but it has to be present. We cannot really produce and create something which is linked altogether. It's not present.
There's some interesting research that Paul Ekman did on emotions, and where he found that if you ask an actor to manipulate their face in certain ways, creating what an outsider would say is a smile or a frown or an angry face, that that person's physiology changes to reflect the expression in their face. And it doesn't require them to have the subjective experience of that particular emotion that's on their face. So it's sort of, there's a kind of similarity.
The meaning is deeply somewhere embedded in the being, yes? And that vibration is a very particular thing. It is a vibration of being, yes? Or vibration of consciousness of a particular kind, which is translated through this apparatus into that what we know as sounds. We know it as a sound, yeah? But it is actually one particular, as Vaikhari, as a how to say, created sound, is only a symbol of that attempt to articulate the meaning of indefinite or infinite existence. Now that meaning of infinite existence has to come down to this apparatus in some form, and we know it as A, yeah, in this system. But because when we make this attempt to articulate it in this apparatus, it comes out as A. Now I'm just bringing the logic of the psychology into the articulation. I don't want to leave it on the level that A has meaning regardless whether we are there or not there, or some other beings there and they will start speaking human language. It is not the type of what I'm thinking about. Yeah? Exactly. That's why I'm reading you these quotations. An equal reign of fixed process on the psychological side, underlying it, on the psychological side, in the determining of the relation of particular sense to particular sound. So I am emphasizing sense and psychological side. What is that sound to do with that sense and psychological side? And not the sound as existing per se, which is determining everything here. Exactly. I want to say that it is absolutely natural. So this apparatus was also developed in a particular way to really fit to that particular expression. But there are so many ways of saying ah, and there are so many allophones, so many languages, so many sounds, and still there is one attempt to articulate a particular vibration or particular sense which we know as ah in the system of Sanskrit. Yes, and Sampath already read to you this, that first simple vowels, yes? I will read again because it's a profound meaning here. So first vowels, a, I, u, ri, of Sanskrit language indicate the idea of being, existence. All the vowels have the idea of existence. They are not like stops, you know, because they are not like consonants, which are always interrupting the flow. Vowel has no end. It's infinite. It has no beginning and no end. I, U. These vowel sounds are infinite. A, in its short form, indicates being in its simplicity, without any further idea of modification or quality. mere or initial being, creative of space. Our sound is not obstructed by anything, it's just the vibration of vocal cords and nothing else. There is no articulation taking place. The vocal cords vibrate and the sound naturally comes out, and that's it. That's basically the initial being. Look at this beautiful definition. Creative of space, but not space per se. It can create the space because it vibrates. E. Now, E is already an articulation. What is happening with an E? We push the tongue to the palate. It's a palatal sound. You can even try E. It's a very difficult sound. You have to push up to the palate tongue and make A, E. Now this is the A sound which is articulated by the tongue, made E. I am pushing slowly tongue up and getting that peak sound, E. E, an intense state of existence. You can feel it psychologically if you try. Being narrowed. It's a very narrow place there. Forceful and insistent, tending to a goal, seeking to occupy space. It's like an arrow. It's like the E in Latin with dot on the top. One E, like a creative of space. Yes. A is creative of space and E is seeking to occupy it. Now,
You said that E is very intense existence. And you also said that words do not have meaning in themselves, like inherent meaning.
I didn't say that. That I didn't say. I subscribe to the opposite. I think the words have meaning, and the meaning, real meaning, basic meaning is coming from the etymological meaning of the sound. Brihaspati's speech, that's why I gave you this myth at the beginning. Always saying that Brihaspati's speech, in spite of Indra's work, still vibrating behind, because it is the stuff which Brihaspati has, yes? The stuff which vibrates is his stuff of consciousness. Though it is rearranged by mind. It was the infinite lexicon of all possible formations in language. He didn't speak about, he was just presenting what it is, the vibration of consciousness. So, E is intense, A is indifferent and just initial being. E is already intense state of being, narrowed, forceful, insistent, tending to occupy a goal, seeking to occupy a space, tending to a goal, have a direction. Oo, what will be oo? Oo, two lips, space, a wide, extended, but not diffused state of existence, being medial and firmly occupant of space. It's interesting because we have two lips, and these two lips give the psychological state of duality, and also that it is medial, that is connecting the two somewhere, occupying the space. To come to U we have to go over O. To come to E we have to go over E. And that is the basics of Sanskrit phonetics. E and O are nothing but diphthongs of U and E. Very clear system without any questions. Nothing is mixed up here mentally, very transparent. Written comes later. Actually, written was never even important so much. It's already our mind yes, interfering and trying to see the meaning. And of course it has influence. Sound has influence on alphabet. But alphabet is secondary. It's a production. Visual production of that meaning which we feel. Now the last one, and we will finish with this. Ri, sound ri, vibrant state of existence. Vibrant. Pulsing in space. Being active about a point within a limit. It's actually originally it was ri, ri, a ri ili u. At least Rik Pratishakya puts ri between i and a, so it was r sound, Rig Veda. Yeah, like French and German, yes, yes. Later it changed with Taittiriya, it became cerebral. But doesn't matter, I don't want to go into the details. What I want to give is Sri Aurobindo's point of view. Vibrant state of existence, pulsing in space, being active about a point within a limit. Now we have individualization, focusing on one particular point in time or in space or in structure. We are focusing now with Ri. Ri has a very strange, very strong sense of breaking through. You take all the words with Ri, it will be all with breaking through. Breaking through. I'm just giving you immediately. English is full of it. It's like vibrating on one point and then breaking through. Yes. E is seeking and U is occupant of the space. So all these are modifications of the same A sound, vibration of vocal cords with the help of the tongue, lips, and nothing else. So these modifications of A were seen in Tantra. A is a major sound. That's why Krishna says, I am A sound, Akara. I am the simple one A sound, from which all other sounds are produced. Why am I kind of focusing so much on this? I wanted to say that the attempt, the psychological attempt to articulate meaning creates the sounds. And this psychological attempt is the meaning. And that's how the Sanskrit has the meaning, because when you speak it, it will be there, present while you speak it. So Sri Aurobindo comes to this and comments in an interesting way. The Vedic Sanskrit, says he, abounds in a variety of forms and inflections. It is fluid and vague, yet richly subtle in its use of cases and tenses. And on its psychological side, it has not yet crystallized, is not entirely hardened into the rigid forms of intellectual precision. It's not hardened into the rigid forms. Look what language he is choosing to say, to convey this meaning. It is not entirely hardened into the rigid forms of intellectual precision. You can immediately feel what he means by that. Our intellectual language which we use is a very strange phenomenon. The word for the Vedic Rishi is still a living thing, still Brihaspati's word. a thing of power, creative, formative. It is not yet a conventional symbol for an idea, but itself the parent and former of ideas. It creates ideas. It's a parent of ideas, not a conventional symbol of an idea. It carries within it the memory of its roots, is still conscient of its own history, of its own origin, where it comes from, of Brihaspati's speech, sounding, ever sounding there, beyond. There is another quotation which is equally important. Thus each word had a general character or quality, guna, which was capable of a great number of applications, and therefore of a great number of possible significances. Not one, many, in any direction, in any contextual meaning, it could find its place and explain something. There's a flexibility of Sanskrit word. And this guna and its result it shared with many kindred sounds. At first, therefore, word clans, word families started life on the communal system with this common stock of possible and realized significances and a common right to all of them. Their individuality lay rather in shades of expression of the same ideas than in any exclusive right to the expression of a single idea, as it is now in our mental language. Is it really comprehensible what I'm trying to read? Yeah? If it is not, please stop and ask, because it's fundamentally important.
So the point is that normally we're trying to pin down a word to mean one exact thing.
Right.
And
But we lost that connection with the origins. We are not creating word anymore. We are using it by using memory, what it means. Our significances are not coming from the Brihaspati's sound. It is coming only from the memory of usage. We can call this table by a chair and this chair by table, and nothing will change according to our mental conception. But of course, according to the Brihaspati speech, it is impossible.
Maybe if you could explain yoga and rudely concepts. Yogi ka artha, rudely artha, pradhan, that might help to get this idea.
I will come to it. Yeah. So the first, therefore, word clans, word families started life on the communal system with a common stock of possible and realized significances and a common right to all of them. Their individuality lay rather in shades of expression of the same ideas than in any exclusive right to the expression of a single idea. The principle of partition was at first fluid, then increased in rigidity until word families and finally single words were able to start life on their own account, as it is now. They are separate words. For in the first state of language, the word is a living and even more living force than idea. Sound determines sense. It is in its last state, the position has been reversed. The idea becomes all important, the sound secondary. So the sound as a psychological state, as an articulation of particular meaning, was more important for the ancient language. That's why I spent so much time showing how this meaning occurs when we articulate the sound. Yes?
so if we're just repeating words in a kind of arbitrary way, without getting back to the source of the word, then it's a kind of self-alienation that's happening there, because then we're just sort of repeating concepts and sort of reality is already categorized without directly re-encountering
Exactly.
all that's there.
Exactly. So we are using word as a token for an idea. We have some thoughts and we need some indicators here to communicate what we mean. That's why we always ask, do you know what I mean? As if we could mean something else by what we say. You will not find this phrase in Sanskrit because what is said, it is that. It is not something else is meant by that. It's already sounding as such.
Have already been captured by this original utterance.
Oh yes.
So
It-
there can be no new, but even if we say this new, it is actually captured there.
It's an infinite speech, infinite flow. And all captured in the sense that the sense or the meaning and sound go together. They were one. Meaning and sound are sometimes identified as a mind and, or heaven and earth, mind and word, yes? Artha and Vak. And they were split by Indra. And that split created grammar. Now only through that split, through that grammar, you can reach to the meaning. You cannot have the meaning out of the sound anymore. Our mind is in between, managing the language. And language is the phenomenon of this split.
So it's not that Brihaspati has completed his thing. He talks on and on.
It's an infinite speech. It's an infinite flow. It was captured only by Indra, not by Brihaspati. Brihaspati is authentic in his sounding of the meaning. And Indra made it applicable, applied psychology, made it out of it. Does it make sense? Yeah?
And you said he's the Lord of the mind, not sort of Lord of consciousness.
Yes, he is the Lord of the divine mind. So I will read one small thing again from Sri Aurobindo. Brahman in the Veda signifies ordinarily the Vedic word or mantra in its profoundest aspect as the expression of the intuition arising out of the depth of the soul or being, that vibration of consciousness which comes out of the soul. It is a voice of the rhythm which has created the worlds and creates perpetually. That's why it is infinite, the Brihaspati's word, that Brahman is infinite, because it perpetually creates the worlds. The vibration of that consciousness is constantly creating the worlds. It supports everything here in the meaningful sense, though Indra interfered and made out of it a language. But the stuff is still Brihaspati's.
So in Sanskrit, basically the grammar that came about is still tries to reflect this into this, no?
Yes, it tries to fit meaning and sound, yes. It is in every language like this. If it is only through the grammar that we understand what is being spoken. We cannot understand it without grammar. If I will start talking to you in Russian, you will not get meaning out of the sound. You will have to learn grammar, and then you will understand what I say. Yeah? It's quite obvious. So what Sri Aurobindo gives here is one more very interesting view. Let us suppose a conscious use of the vibrations of sound which will produce corresponding forms or changes of form. Let us realize then that a vibration of sound on the material plane presupposes a corresponding vibration on the vital, without which it could not have come into play. So on the material plane, on the Vaikhari, so to say, the vibration which we know, which we perceive as vibration or sound or any vibration, presupposes the vibration on the vital plane, from where it arrives to the material. Then, that again presupposes a corresponding originative vibration on the mental. The mental presupposes corresponding originative vibration on the supramental, at the very root of things. So everything which is spoken here, whether it is in proper context or misplaced, is somewhere originated in the origin of things, at the very root of things, on the supramental plane. All this noise, what we make, noise is because of misplacement, because it is really not finding its proper context. But the vibration is true. Just think about it. There is no untrue word. It is always true to itself. But because it is misplaced in context, it tells a lie. All vibrations, yes, but a mental vibration implies thought and perception, and a supramental vibration implies a supreme vision and discernment. All vibrations of sound on that higher plane is then instinct with and expressive of the supreme discernment of a truth in things, and is at the same time creative, instinct with a supreme power, which casts into forms the truth discerned and eventually, descending from plane to plane, reproduces it in the physical form or object created in matter by etheric sound. By the way, if you think even about physics, objects, what are these vibrations? These electrons, atoms, these constant vibrations, waves, particles, movements, photons. These are constant vibrations within matter which constitute the material reality. Thus we see that the theory of creation by the word, which is the absolute expression of the truth, and the theory of the material creation by sound vibration in the ether, correspond and are two logical poles of the same idea. They both belong to the same ancient Vedic system. So the idea was that the word is not only influencing our consciousness as human beings, but it creates the whole universe. And that correspondence of the mantra with the vibration of the outer world was taken seriously by these scholars, Vedic scholars. They were looking for this creation from this perspective. Sri Aurobindo speaks about the mantra, a supreme, an absolute in itself, a reaching to an infinite and utmost, a last point of perfection of its own possibilities, is that to which all action of nature intuitively tends. The whole nature is seeking this word, this ultimate vibration of consciousness which can manifest the spirit finally. Intuitively, the whole action of nature intuitively turns in its unconscious formations, and when it has arrived to that point, it has justified its existence to the Spirit, which has created it, and fulfilled the secret creative will within it. Look at this beautiful vision. Speech, the expressive word, was such a summit or absolute, a perfection which is the touch of the infinite upon its finite possibilities. and seal upon it of its creator. The mantra is the word that carries the Godhead in it, or the power of the Godhead, can bring it into the consciousness and fix there it and its workings. Mantra can fix the workings of the spirit in the outer consciousness. The word is fixing the spiritual meaning in the outer surface consciousness and its workings. Awaken there the thrill of the infinite in the outer consciousness, the force of something absolute. Perpetuate the miracle of the supreme utterance. The highest power of speech, and especially of poetic speech, is what we have to make here the object of our scrutiny. Discover. And I will read to you one more beautiful from Savitri, which will give you the sense how it works. This word was seed of all the thing to be. This word was seed of all the thing to be. A hand from some greatness opened her heart's locked doors. Her means Savitri's. And showed the work for which her strength was born. As when the mantra sings in yoga's ear, its message enters, stirring the blind brain, and keeps it, and keeps in the dim ignorant cells its sound. The hearer understands a form of words by the mind, and music on the index thought it holds. He strives to read it with a laboring mind, but finds bright hints, not the embodied truth. Then, falling silent in himself to know. Then, falling silent in himself to know. He meets the deeper listening of the soul. The word repeats itself in rhythmic strains. Thought, vision, feeling, sense, the body's self are seized unutterably, and he endures an ecstasy and an immortal change. He feels the wideness and becomes a power. All knowledge rushes on him like a sea, like an ocean. It rushes on him. Transmuted by the white spiritual ray, he walks in naked heavens of joy and calm, sees the God face, and hears transcendent speech. Just to give you a sense how little we know about what we are really using here, this power of the word. In The Secret of the Vedas, Sri Aurobindo defines the functionality of the word in the hymns by the Vedic rishis. He says that the hymns possess indeed a finished metrical form, a constant subtlety and skill in their technique, great variations of style and poetic personality. They are not the work of rude, barbarous or primitive craftsmen, but the living breath of a supreme and conscious art, with capital A, forming its creations in the puissant but well-governed movement of a self-observing inspiration. Just look at this psychological description. Still, all these high gifts have deliberately been exercised within one unvarying framework and always with the same materials. It's not for the sake of enjoying the art of the word. There is a utility to it. For the art of expression was to the rishis only a means, not an aim. Their principal preoccupation was strenuously practical, almost utilitarian, in the highest sense of utility. The hymn was for the rishi, who composed it, a means of a spiritual progress for himself and for the others. It rose out of his soul. It became a power of his mind. It was the vehicle of his self-expression in some important or even critical moment of his life's inner history. It helped him to express the God in him, to destroy the devourer, the expresser of evil. It became a weapon in the hands of the Aryan striver after perfection. It flashed forth like Indra's lightning against the coverer on the slopes, the wolf on the path, the robber by the streams. Just a little poetry in Sri Aurobindo. These are the realities, inner realities, which are symbolized by these symbols. This is the weapon. The word is the weapon. Now, my introduction to my presentation is over. Now I can start my presentation. But without introduction, it's not clear why that is so important, that word, and the whole view. And I will make a presentation is not so important, but it will give you a sense of Svadhyaya. And that was the major topic of today. What is Svadhyaya? But maybe we are already in the Svadhyaya. Shall I give this presentation, yeah? Are you still fresh? Are you still with me? Somebody said. Deep, we went deep inside, too deep, yeah. Fall asleep. Svadhyaya od jnana yajna, the sacrifice by knowledge. Shreyan dravyamayad yajnat jnana yajna parantapa. Sarvam karma khilam partha jnane parisamapyate. This is what Krishna says to Arjuna. The sacrifice by knowledge is greater than that by any other material means, O Arjuna. For all action ends in knowledge experience. Jnane parisamapyate. All action is for the sake of experience. It is not for the sake of itself, for its own sake. So what is this jnana yajna which Krishna speaks so highly about? Svadhyaya. Svadhyaya means learning for oneself or reading to oneself. It is very different from padapatha or kramapatha or mantrapatha. It is not the same. If we read Agnimihile Purohitam, it is not Svadhyaya. It is mantrapatha. Svadhyaya, it is when you read to yourself to understand the meaning. And usually it is not read with a Vedic accent, because Vedic accent is to preserve the text. I never spoke about it, but one day I will be able to say something about it. So in the time of Brahmanas, and starting from Taittiriya Samhita, we find very interesting expression which is Ya evam Veda. Every text is ended with this phrase, Ya evam Veda Saha something. You know? The one who knows like this, he will get the fruit of the sacrifice. So the description of the ritual goes on, for example, Ashvamedha, and then at the end we have Yayavam Veda. The one who knows it like this will get the fruit of the sacrifice. Know it like this, so that is enough? It seems it is enough. It is enough to know the text, not really to perform the sacrifice. And Sayana confirms this view, and I will quote from him. So you remember I was giving you scheme of Agnihotra, 3, Hotara, Dvaryo, Udgatar, making oblation into 3 fires, and Brahman observing their action, and at the end the dakshina is split half-half. Brahman takes half, who didn't do anything, didn't speak a word, and all the 3 priests who did everything take the half. And then Aitareya Brahmana disputes why it is so. Because Brahman represented the witnessing consciousness of the mind, whereas they represented the speech, the action. So it is like heaven and earth, yes, equally distributed. So the same, it seems, the same technique is used in Svadhyaya. On one side, this the one who recites the word is reciting it knowing totally by heart. But he reads this word to himself. Why would somebody do that? If you know text by heart, why should you read this text to yourself? No, it's a good question. Suppose you know the text by heart, you already know everything about it, you read it many times, and then you sit every day and read this text to yourself. Now, from the mental point of view, it's ridiculous. Yeah? Because mind who knows already, which knows the text, would not do it. But these texts are different, and the purpose of Svadhyaya is different. So on one side you perfectly know it by tongue, by heart, which is uttering it without you being engaged in forming the speech. And with other part, mind, you observe the flow of the meaning, which is not engaged. Which is not engaged in the formulation of the text. There is a split within you on heaven and earth. Heaven is observing the flow of the speech, so to say. And then something happens to you, and you are becoming the altar of that sacrifice. And that's why it is Jnana Yajna. New meanings enter you. From observing the flow of this word, you, with your silent mind, get the life experience of different kind. By the way, this device is deeply psychological. That's why we read books, that's why we watch cinema, go to the theater. What is happening there in the movie? We are watching some movie, some words, something happened there, and we are fully experiencing all those emotions and all that drama within ourselves. How can we get that? Because the word on one side and the meaning on the other side, observing it, creates the experience in the life force. The same happens when you read to yourself the text. I was referring to Ramayana, that when I read Ramayana, I had the greatest experiences of my life. My life is no comparison to that when you get the emotions and the depth of understanding of human life from reading such text as Ramayana. And that is the greatness of it. Or you take Shakespeare. When you read Shakespeare, you get an absolutely marvelous experience, which you cannot get from your life. Because your life is not so intense and not so profound as that life which you are given in that text. And in the form which is it is expressed. So you can imagine these texts which are mantric, which were the vehicles for the rishis to to reach to their highest, utmost highest consciousness, you read them and observe with your mind what will happen to you. There's will be some change within your system, within your consciousness. That was the device used by the whole Indian tradition. The whole Indian civilization is based on this principle. So, Taittiriya Aranyaka, in Taittiriya Aranyaka, Rishi exclaims, Apam, apam, apah, sarvaha, smada, smad ito mutah, agnirvayuscha, suryascha, sahasanshakara riddhiya. I have gathered all nourishing powers of consciousness from here, from there, and from beyond. Agni and Vayu and Surya I have combined for the growth. And I was giving you that scheme. Surya, Vayu and Agni, 3 levels of consciousness are combined. And this is the purpose of the sacrifice. The growth of this unity of mental, vital and physical consciousness. Tasmat svadhyayo dhyetavyo yam kratum adhite tena tena asya ishtam bhavati agner vayoscha vayor adityasya sayujyam gacchati. Therefore svadhyaya should be learned, for whatever he reads about action, and by that reading he fulfills the desired and moves towards union with Agni, Vayu and Aditya. It is by reading about the action, by bringing it into your consciousness by the word, that the desired fruit of the sacrifice is fulfilled. So then the text on Svadhyaya, Sayana comments and says that there are 5 major sacrifices, great sacrifices, and he says that 5 of them are to gods, to ancestors, to spirits, to man and to Brahman. When one puts into the fire only one fuel, it is already Deva Yajna. When one offers to the ancestors only water, explaining Svadha, then it is already Pitri Yajna. When one makes even a little offering from food to the spirits, Bhutas, then it is already Bhuta Yajna. When one gives food to Brahmanas, it is already Manushya Yajna. But when one reads for oneself, even one verse from Rigveda, Yajurveda or Samaveda, then the Brahma Yajna is performed. Brahma Yajna or Jnana Yajna or Svadhyaya. So in the Svadhyaya section of Taittiriya Aranyaka, he says that rishis are the sons of Brahma Swayambhu, that Brihaspati who was born as the creator of this world within the heaven and earth in later mythology of Vishnu Purana. The yajna was received from Prajapati by gods and rishis, and by performing it they made gods, rishis made gods again sinless, apahata papmanach, and thus went back to heaven, svargam lokamayan. They can return back by Svadhyaya. And the rishis themselves joined the abode of Brahman. Brahmanach sayujyam rishayo gachan. In order to explain better what Svadhyaya is, Taittiriya Aranyaka quotes the text from Rigveda. Richo akshare parame vyoman dirghatama uchatya, the last hymn. Yasmin deva adhi vishve nisheduh. Yastan naveda kim richaka rishyati. Ya ittat viduh ta ime samasata iti. The sacred verses are in the highest heaven where all gods abide. He who doesn't know that, what is he doing? What is he going to do with the sacred word? Those indeed who know that, they are perfectly united, or composed rather. And later text says, Yavatirvai devataha sarvaha vedavidi brahmane vasanti. All gods as they are live in the man, Brahman, who knows Veda. And Sayana comments how it is happening, because he is reciting on one side, and the other side he is knowing the meaning of that word, observing the meaning and reading the text. The text itself, the word itself, creates within the consciousness all the means to understand it. It is happening gradually. First you read and you don't understand. But the word vibrates within. In this blind brain, it is stirring the blind brain. And it works within, vibrates within these dumb cells. And slowly, the means of understanding are being created within the being. And next time you read, you understand differently. Next time you read to yourself, it is growing in the meaning until it is totally revealed to you. That was the way of Svadhyaya, and that is the basic and the most important device for the whole Indian civilization. That's why Veda was so important. Because it was the means to really rise in consciousness. To rise in consciousness to that level. By reading it to yourself and letting it create within you the means of understanding. By the way, very similar mother speaks about Savitri. Somebody asked her, why should we read Savitri if you don't understand what it means? She said, yes, read it always. Read it with a silent mind. Let words sink deeply into your consciousness. And then these words will create the means of understanding gradually. They will transform your consciousness and make it fit for this understanding. So this is basically my presentation on Svadhyaya and the Veda for today. I had to do it because without it not much could be understood if we would go into the hymns without knowing the functionality of the word. Now you will have a different view on it. You will look for this particular action of the word within your consciousness. So we can stop here.